Jiho clutched the thin wooden pole so tightly his knuckles whitened, as though the flag might fly away if he loosened his grip. The crimson cloth, stitched with the leader's emblem, felt heavier than it should, have heavier with meaning, heavier with danger. In North Korea, a flag was not fabric, it was survival. The courtyard outside his school swarmed with students like him. Lined in rigid rows, their voices echoing in perfect unison. Long live the marshal, long live the great son of the nation. Their words rose into the gray morning sky, mechanical and hollow. Jiho shouted as loudly as he could, though each syllable scraped his throat raw. At 17, Jiho was already gaunt, his cheeks sunken from months of meager rations. The government claimed their region's hunger was due to floods. But everyone knew the truth. The soldiers ate first, the party second, and the scraps, if any, fell to families like his. The night before, his mother had divided a handful of cracked corn among the three of them. He had pretended to be full so his younger sister could eat more, yet here he stood, expected to cheer with strength he did not have. His stomach growled so loudly he feared the student beside him might hear. At home, his mother whispered constantly about obedience. Keep your head down, speak nothing, do what they demand. She was terrified of the eyes everywhere, the neighbors, the soldiers, even Jiho's own teachers. A misplaced word could mean prison. A slip of loyalty could mean death. As Jiho's flag rippled in the cold wind, he felt the contradiction gnaw inside him. How could devotion feed them? How could chance replace rice? His heart longed to ask these questions aloud, but he never dared. He had seen what happened to those who spoke too freely. One day they were in the market, the next they vanished. So he raised the flag higher, forcing his voice to rise above the crowd. But inside, where no soldier could see, Jiho's voice whispered the truth. Survival came not from loyalty, but from silence. The day's chant still rang in Jiho's ears long after the crowd dispersed. He walked home along the muddy road, the flag folded under his arm, his body weary from the forced cheer. The streets of his village were lined with crumbling homes, and the hollow faces of neighbors who looked more like shadows than people. Hunger had carved deep lines into everyone's skin, leaving no room for laughter, no room for joy. When Jiho stepped inside their one-room home, the smell of boiled grass greeted him. His mother knelt over a dented pot, stirring the watery broth with trembling hands. "This is all we have today," she whispered as if ashamed. His younger sister Sora darted to his side, her tiny arms wrapping around him. She was only 9, her ribs too visible beneath her patched dress. "Appa, did they give you food at school?" she asked, her wide eyes full of desperate hope. Jiho's throat tightened. He wanted to lie, to pretend he had eaten so she would feel safe. But the truth showed in the sharp angles of his face, in the hollowness of his stomach. He shook his head gently. "No, Sara, nothing." They sat together on the floor, sharing the thin broth in silence. Jiho let his mother and sister take the largest gulps, sipping only enough to wet his lips. His hunger clawed at him, but the sight of Sora licking the bowl clean reminded him why he endured. That night, Jiho lay awake on the straw mat. Through the thin walls, he could hear soldiers' boots outside, patrolling the village even in the darkness. He thought about the slogans he had shouted earlier, how the leader's name was supposed to give them strength, but no name could quiet the gnawing pain in his belly. His mother's words echoed in his mind. Survival is silence. Yet Jiho wondered how long silence could last when hunger was louder than fear. As the frost crept through the cracks of their home, he pressed his arm across his stomach, as if to hold it together. He did not yet know that hunger would be the least of his trials. The following morning, the village was ordered to gather once again in the square. News had spread that a high-ranking officer from Pyongyang would be visiting, and every citizen was expected to show unwavering loyalty. Jiho's stomach churned not, from hunger alone, but from dread. The square filled with ragged men, women, and children, each clutching their faded red flags. Soldiers in crisp uniforms lined the edges, their rifles gleaming like warnings. Loudspeakers crackled with patriotic music, drowning out the whispers of fear. When the officer arrived, the crowd erupted in forced applause. Jiho clapped until his palms burned, his eyes fixed on the ground. The officer's voice boomed through a microphone, praising the supreme leader, condemning traitors, promising food that never came. Every sentence ended with cheers the people dared not withhold. But Jiho's gaze was drawn to a boy standing nearby, no older than 12. His flag slipped from his thin fingers, falling to the dirt. Time seemed to freeze. The soldier pounced, striking the boy across the face. The crack of the blow silenced the crowd. The boy's mother rushed forward, begging for mercy, but she was shoved aside. Jiho's heart hammered as he watched. The soldier shouted, demanding to know why the boy had disrespected the nation's symbol. The boy trembled, stammering that his hands were numb from the cold. It didn't matter. 2 soldiers dragged him away, his screams echoing across the square. The crowd remained frozen, clapping mechanically when commanded, as if nothing had happened. Jiho wanted to run after the boy, to shout, to protest, but his mother's warning anchored him. Survival is silence. When the parade ended, Jiho marched home with the others, his legs heavy. That night, he lay awake, replaying the boy's terrified face. He realized something with sickening clarity. It could have been him, and one day it might be. That night, Jiho's village was wrapped in silence, broken only by the hollow groans of the wind. Families retreated behind their thin wooden doors, extinguishing fires early to avoid drawing suspicion. North Korea, even light could betray you. Jiho sat with his mother and sister in the darkness of their hut. His mother whispered a prayer under her breath, quiet enough that not even the walls could hear. They ate their ration of watery corn porridge, the grains so few Jiho could count them on his tongue. His stomach screamed for more, but hunger was something he had learned to tame, like a wild animal chained inside his body. After his sister fell asleep, his mother leaned close, her breath trembling. "Jiho," she whispered, "you must be careful. What happened today? No one is safe. Even a child can be taken." Her eyes glistened in the candle's dying flame. "Promise me you will never speak your thoughts aloud. Not even to a friend. Words can kill." But Jiho could not stay silent. The image of the boy being dragged away gnawed at him like a ghost. He whispered back, "Mother, why do we live like this? Why do we clap for lies? Why do they starve us while they feast?" Her hand flew to his mouth. "Enough," she hissed, her voice sharp with terror. "If the neighbors hear you, we are all dead." She looked toward the cracked window as though soldiers might already be listening. In that moment, Jiho understood that survival here was not only about food, it was about silence, obedience, and fear. Later, when the village slept, Jiho overheard faint voices outside, 2 men murmuring near the well. He recognized one as Mr. Han, an older villager known for keeping his head down. But tonight, his tone carried urgency. "There are whispers of escape," Mr. Han said, "through the river, if one is brave enough." Jiho froze, heart pounding. Escape. The word burned in his ears like forbidden fire. He wanted to run outside and ask questions, but he stayed still, trapped between longing and terror. For the first time, the thought took root in his mind. Perhaps survival meant more than silence. Perhaps survival meant leaving. The next morning, the air was brittle with frost, the kind that burned the skin rather than soothed it. Jiho walked to the communal square with his school group, clutching his paper flag as the village gathered for another mandatory celebration. Today was the leader's birthday, a day where joy was not a choice but an order. Drums beat, banners fluttered, and soldiers patrolled the edges with rifles slung across their backs. Children were commanded to wave flags in perfect unison, their voices raised in hollow praise. Jiho's arms ached, his flag trembling with each chant. Then it happened. A gust of wind slipped through the square, and the brittle stick snapped in Jiho's hands. His flag tumbled to the ground, fluttering at the boots of a soldier. Time froze. The crowd gasped. The soldier's face darkened as though Jiho had spat on the leader himself. Without hesitation, 2 guards lunged forward, grabbing Jiho by the shoulders. His knees buckled as they yanked him upward, his small body lifted like prey caught in a trap. "No," his mother cried from the crowd, her voice raw and breaking. She rushed forward, but a soldier slammed the butt of his rifle across her chest, sending her sprawling to the dirt. Jiho screamed, reaching for her, but his hands met only air. The guards dragged him toward the truck waiting at the edge of the square. Villagers stared in silence, some with pity, most with fear. None dared move. To intervene was to invite death upon one's own family. Inside the truck, Jiho's head slammed against the wooden floor as they shoved him down. The stench of sweat, blood, and despair filled the cramped space. Other prisoners sat hunched beside him, their eyes vacant, their mouths shut. Through the cracks in the slats, Jiho caught a final glimpse of his mother on her knees, clutching the dirt where he had stood, her face pressed into the ground as though begging it to swallow her grief. The engine roared to life. Jiho's world rattled with each turn of the wheels, carrying him away from everything he had ever known. And in that moment, he realized, in North Korea, a flag was heavier than freedom. The prison camp lay beyond the hills, hidden behind walls of barbed wire and watchtowers that loomed like skeletal giants. When the truck jolted to a stop, the guards shoved Jiho out onto the frozen earth. His legs gave way instantly. He had not eaten since dawn, and fear hollowed his strength. The camp smelled of smoke, sweat, and rot. Thin prisoners shuffled past in tattered uniforms, their faces gaunt, their eyes lifeless. Children, no older than Jiho, staggered under the weight of logs strapped to their backs. A guard barked an order, and one boy stumbled. The rifle butt came down without hesitation, leaving the boy crumpled in the mud. Jiho's stomach twisted not, from hunger, but from the terror that he would be next. He was herded into a small barrack. The wooden floor was wet, the air suffocating with mildew. Straw mats lay scattered where prisoners collapsed after endless labor. A thin man with sunken cheeks looked at Jiho and whispered, "Don't cry. They punish tears here." His voice cracked, but his warning was sharp enough to freeze the boy's sobs in his throat. The next morning, Jiho was thrown into the line of prisoners, marching toward the forest. He was handed an axe far too heavy for his small arms. The soldiers shouted for them to cut wood, to move faster, to never stop. His hands blistered within hours, his palms slick with blood, when the sun dipped below the horizon. Jiho collapsed on the return march, his legs trembling. A soldier raised his rifle to strike him, but another prisoner, gray-haired man with eyes like burning coals, quickly pulled Jiho up, whispering, "Stand. If you fall, you disappear." That night Jiho lay on the straw, his body aching, his spirit fraying. Through the cracks in the wall he saw the barbed wire glinting under the moonlight. It was both a cage and a reminder. Freedom was just beyond those sharp edges, yet impossibly far. Still in the suffocating silence, Jiho clenched his fists. He remembered his mother's face in the crowd, her cry echoing like a wound. For her, he thought, he must endure. In the village, Minjun could not sleep. Every night he lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, while the memory of his father being dragged away replayed in his mind. The sound of the crowd's silence, the way the guards beat Jiho for dropping the flag, it seared into him like fire. But fear was not all he felt. There was something else growing inside him, a dangerous thought, one that North Koreans were never supposed to have: defiance. By day, Minjun pretended to be obedient. He bowed at portraits of the leaders, clapped loudly at speeches, and repeated slogans with a voice strong enough to mask his trembling. But when no one was watching, he listened. He lingered near the soldiers' quarters, memorizing their routines. He studied the gates of the prison camp from the hilltops, pretending to forage for wood. Every detail mattered: the shifts of the guards, the sound of the sirens, the whistle that marked the end of labor. At night, he whispered to his mother. She wanted to stop him, begged him not to risk everything, but her eyes betrayed something else: hope. "You are only a boy," she murmured. "How can you fight them?" Minjun clenched his fists. "I cannot fight them. Da-da-da. But I can find father. I can bring him back." One evening, while trading scraps of corn husks with an old neighbor, Minjun overheard something that made his heart race. The neighbor, drunk on homemade liquor, muttered that prisoners were often moved before winter deepened, that the regime wanted them to build storage bunkers near the river. That night, Minjun dreamed of his father, broken and thin, working under the shadow of the mountains. He woke, drenched in sweat, but with a plan forming in his mind. He would not storm the prison camp. That would be suicide. No, he would slip inside unnoticed, like a shadow. He would find his father, whisper his name, and together they would wait for the moment the guards grew careless. Minjun was terrified, but his fear was no longer enough to chain him. Love, fierce and desperate, burned hotter than fear. And so, in the stillness of dawn, the boy began preparing for the most dangerous journey of his life. Winter came early that year. Draping the mountains in white and tightening hunger's grip on the village, people whispered of deaths behind closed doors, of families disappearing in the night. Fear seeped into every corner like the cold, but beneath it, something else stirred in unease the regime could not fully silence. Minjan noticed it first in the way people exchanged glances when soldiers passed, eyes that carried both terror and exhaustion. At the communal square, a young mother dared to speak softly. "Why must our children starve when the soldiers feast?" Her words vanished quickly into silence, but Minjan had heard. He realized he wasn't alone in his defiance, only everyone was too afraid to breathe it aloud. Meanwhile, Jiho suffered in the camp, forced to dig trenches in frozen ground. His hands split open and bled daily, as guards beat him for working too slowly, yet he could no longer feel his fingers. What kept him alive was a memory of his son's eyes, fierce and determined, staring as he was dragged away. Jiho whispered to himself in the dark barracks, "Stay alive, he will find you." Back in the village, Min Chun's plan grew bolder. He approached a frail old man who once served as a camp guard before being discarded. With trembling lips, the elders shared fragments of knowledge, the weak spots in the fence, the times when patrols were thinnest. "Boy," the man warned, "this path will not save you. It will consume you." But Minjan only bowed and replied, "Then let it consume me, so long as father breathes again." Whispers spread in the village that the boy was reckless, that his defiance would doom them all. Yet others, silent but listening, began leaving him scraps of food or pointing him toward safer trails. Fear kept their mouths shut, but their small acts told another story. Rebellion had roots, buried deep, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to water them. Minchan's heart raced with every step of preparation. He was no longer just a boy searching for his father. He was becoming something else. Ember, the soldiers had failed to stamp out. And embers, if left to burn, could one day set fire to an entire forest. The night was moonless, the sky heavy with clouds that seemed to conspire in Minchin's favor. He had waited weeks for this, studying guard rotations, memorizing shadows, and clenching his hunger into discipline. Tonight, he would risk everything. Clutching a bundle of stolen tools, an old wire cutter, a piece of cloth to muffle sound, Minjin crept toward the edge of the camp's outer perimeter. The wind cut through his thin clothes, but adrenaline kept his body trembling with heat. His heart pounded so loudly he feared the guards would hear it echo against the steel fences. From a distance, the camp looked like a fortress of misery. Floodlights swept lazily across the frozen ground, towers loomed with watchful eyes, and barbed wire curled like a nest of vipers. Inside those walls, his father was wasting away. That thought alone kept Minjan moving. He crouched behind a mound of snow, waiting for the beam of a searchlight to pass. His breaths came in small, careful clouds. One wrong step meant not just his death, but the death of his father, too. Finally, the light swung away. He darted forward, knees sinking into the frost, until he reached the fence. The wire was colder than ice, burning his fingers as he fitted the cutter to the steel. Every snap sounded like thunder in his ears, though the night remained silent. He froze after each cut, praying the guard's footsteps didn't veer his way. Sweat trickled despite the cold. Then a sound, boots crunching snow. The guard's shadow stretched dangerously close. Minchun's heart nearly stopped. He pressed himself flat against the frozen earth, whispering, "Don't see me. Please, don't see me." The guard paused, lit a cigarette, then turned away, leaving only smoke and dread behind. Minjin continued, faster now, until a small gap opened in the fence. He slipped inside, his body shaking with both terror and triumph. Ahead lay rows of barracks, dimly lit and silent, but alive with broken souls inside. Somewhere among them, his father. The attempt had begun. There was no turning back now. Minchan's breath came in short bursts as he slipped between the shadows of the prison barracks. The smell of smoke and human misery hung thick in the air. Each building looked the same gray, lifeless, but he knew his father was inside one of them, clinging to what remained of his strength. He pressed his ear to the wooden door of a dimly lit barrack. Groans and muffled coughing echoed within. Summoning courage, Minjan pushed it open just enough to slip inside. The air was suffocating, rank with sweat, rot, and despair. Rows of gaunt prisoners lay on straw mats, their eyes hollow. Then, from the farthest corner, a whisper. Minjun, his heart leaped. His father, barely a shadow of the man he once knew, lay curled against the wall. Bones jutted through his skin, his face pale and thin, but his eyes still flickered with recognition. Tears blurred Min Chun's vision as he knelt beside him. "Appa, I'm here. We're leaving." The words felt too fragile for the danger that surrounded them. With trembling hands, he tried to lift his father, but the older man winced, too weak to stand. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered. "They'll kill you." Footsteps outside. Voices. Minjun froze. His time had run out. He had risked everything to get here, but freedom was slipping from his grasp. He dragged his father toward the back of the barrack, searching desperately for another way out. A loose plank in the wall revealed a gap just wide enough for him to squeeze through, but his father was too frail to fit. Their eyes met in the darkness, filled with unspoken love and dread. His father pressed a trembling hand against Min Chun's chest. "Go live. If you die here, then both of us are lost." "No," Min Chun whispered fiercely, but tears betrayed him. Outside, guards shouted, boots closing in. His father pushed him toward the gap with the last of his strength. Min Chun's body shook with sobs, but he obeyed, slipping through into the freezing night as the door to the barrack burst open behind him. Gunshots rang out. Silence followed. Min Chun fell into the snow, his body racked with grief. He had escaped, but the cost of freedom was a wound that would never heal.